Okay, hi everybody. This is Gila Glassberg, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of Get Into It with Gila. And today I have Naomi Shulman. Hi, Naomi.
Hi,
How are you?
doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? What do you do, and where do you live?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, first of all.
Sure.
Um, I live in Rochester, New York,
Mhm.
and right now I'm juggling being a stay-at-home mom during COVID and being a work-at-home mom. I do
Mhm.
a lot of writing and editing, both my own projects and I do a lot of freelance also. I have private clients that I do either writing coaching or ghostwriting. Um, and guiding new authors through the publishing process.
Wow, that's really cool. Just so you know, I think I told you this, and the listeners know, I have this dream to write a book. So, um, I was really excited when we spoke. So you and I spoke like 2 weeks ago when I was in Rochester visiting my family, and I was so excited to hear a little bit about your journey and the books that you wrote and the books that you like about your story. So could you tell us a little bit about your books?
Sure. So I've written in a bunch of genres actually by now. I have done children's books. I've done a few self-help books on eating disorders. And I have, most recently, I wrote a book called With All I Am, which is about using everything that we have in ourselves as individuals in our personal avodas Hashem. And that book is especially meaningful to me. I'm very passionate about that place where spirituality and mental health go together, and that's something that I talk about a lot in the book. Because I think that something that I'm really excited about with this book is it speaks to both of those worlds and kind of normalizes mental health as something that is just part of everybody's day-to-day life to some extent. And because of that, it's something that we can use to build our relationship with Hashem in a very real, authentic way that is something that is unique to us as individuals. Um, I don't know what else to say about
That's
that.
really, I really cannot wait to read that book. I really can't wait to read it. And when you said it's unique to individuals, did you mean like, is it unique to like Jews versus non-Jews or everyone? Like everyone could use their mental health
I
to,
think everybody, because I mean, the book is written, it's geared towards the observant Jewish world, just with the lingo and everything. There is a glossary in the back, but it talks about Jewish holidays. But the truth is that God created every single person on this planet and has a very deep personal connection with every single person, regardless of background, where they come from, religion, anything.
right. Okay, so what was your first book?
My first book ever was it was called One Life, and it's a book about recovery from eating disorders. And I told it from my perspective. My goal with that one, there's a lot of books out there that go through, signs and symptoms of eating disorders. And One Life focuses on the inner journey. What are the thoughts and feelings involved? What's the mindset like? And I was very fearlessly honest about it, like gut wrenchingly honest. My mom said it was the first time when she read that book, it was the first time that she understood why I couldn't just eat the gosh darn fruit cup. And
Mm-hmm.
like all the thoughts that would go through my head and all of the rituals that I would do around food. Um, I really focused also on the path to recovery versus the illness itself. And, because eating disorders are not about food, they become about food because that's kind of the go-to coping that a person grabs onto. But the essence of an eating disorder is on the inside. It's not, because if it was about food, then okay, start eating normally and you're fine. But it's not,
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's not the answer. So that book goes through, there's 11 chapters for the 11 weeks that I spent at a residential treatment facility. And I also, there's a, each chapter starts with a self-help tool, like something that can replace the eating disorder as a coping strategy, because you can't just take it away and put it in a vacuum,
Right.
because something else is going to fill that space.
Mm-hmm.
So part of recovery is learning, so now you need something to cope with whatever the feeling or situation is. So what do you fill it with? And so the skills start small and then build up towards the end. And, the title, One Life, came from something that my dietitian at the treatment center kept telling me is, you only have one life, don't waste it on an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so powerful. So since you're comfortable with sharing about your eating disorder, do you mind sharing like how it began?
Yeah, first of all, I'm in recovery for 13 years. So
Woohoo!
yeah, it's big stuff. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because sometimes I thought like I was just never going to see the light.
Yeah. Yeah.
It started really early. I went through a lot of stuff when I was a kid, and I had undiagnosed mental illness for years and years and years before anybody had any idea what was wrong with me. I was just kind of like this troubled kid, and nobody really knew. And there were things that were going on that people didn't really know about. So I felt like, I'm dealing with all this stuff. And sometime around, I think it was my 8th grade year, I got it in my head that like I wasn't one of the thin pretty girls, which in retrospect was kind of ridiculous, because I was a perfectly, like, I wasn't a stick. I wasn't one of like the naturally tiny people, but I was definitely on the thinner side of normal. And I mean, that's irrelevant when it comes to this stuff. And I started feeling very self-conscious. I think a lot of girls going through puberty become all bashful about their appearance, and it's a very normal thing. You start developing curves and you think, oh my God, I'm out of control. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it just kind of hung around there, plus everything else going on in my life and comments that people would make about people who are overweight. And I would kind of like, I wanted to, like kind of the this is stereotypical idea of like wanting to be good and pure and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until 9th grade when my biology class did this lesson on nutrition, and we had to count calories, which was a terrible idea. Any teachers out there, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Seriously, seriously. Oh yeah.
and I remember one of the things was I got super obsessive about
Mm-hmm.
anything, like licking cookie batter. I would have to look up the calories in that little lick of cookie batter, or I either wouldn't eat it, or if I did, I wrote it down. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like one of the girls in my class who was significantly heavier than me, like I don't know that by number, but just, by appearance, her chart was like half of what mine was. In reality, probably because I was writing down literally everything and rounding up, and most people in the class were barely writing down, just to get the assignment done. But I took this as like it was written in stone, if that's what it was. And oh my God, I'm out of control. I'm going to be bigger than her. And then um, in my mind, that would just make me like out of control. And then that was also the first time that I learned how many calories were in things. Cause up until then I'm like, oh, this is a healthy food. And it still is, but now it has so many calories in it. And so things started to really spiral. And it was also the first year I was put on medication for things and ended up with suppressed appetite. Things spiraled very fast. So I was about 14 when I first battled anorexia full force.
And did your family know about it?
Yeah, at first they didn't believe it was a real thing. I'm the oldest in my family, so kind of like the test run kid. And
Mm-hmm. I get that.
I think every oldest can relate to that to
I'm
some
not
point.
an oldest, but I have an oldest, so I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We paved the way. You should be thankful.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yes, I'm so thankful. It's glorious.
You should be. Seriously. You were probably allowed to do a lot more stuff at an earlier age. Am I right?
Well, I'm the fourth of nine, so my parents were still pretty strict with me.
Really?
Yes, my little brother, you did
I
Yahoo.
think mine gave up by the time well, the ones under me, they came really fast. So, and then
Mm-hmm.
there were twins,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly, I think if the house wasn't burning, they were good.
Yeah, oh, totally. I
They
can
could
relate
go
to
out in
that.
high school like till much later than I was allowed to.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well,
fine.
my youngest brother, you did, yeah. He's like the king of the house, the youngest brother. We're
That's
like,
funny.
we like didn't get anything, and they're like, "Oh, Diddy, we could buy you $200 pairs of shoes." Sure, no problem. We're like, "What? $200 pairs of shoes?" Like, that's just the way it is.
That's not really the stuff I'm referring to. More like I couldn't cross the street till I was 10
Right,
because, oh my God, there's cars in the street.
right.
And then my brother and sister are like crossing at 6. Like, ah, it's a little street.
Yeah, yeah. That I get because my daughter Shayna, who is my oldest, and she's almost 8. When we were in Rochester, my brother was letting his 9-year-old cross. I was like, "You guys are insane," but like, not 7 is not the same as 9, but like, I just can't imagine letting her cross. Like, she's,
Right.
sorry. Okay, yeah. So your family, they knew
They
about
didn't
it.
really understand it. And,
You were
more
open
than
with
just
them
being the
about it.
oldest, this was their first experience
Did
with
you try to
mm,
hide it?
what?
Did you try like did you try to hide it? Did you tell
The
them?
truth is, I didn't even understand it in the beginning.
Right.
I wasn't like, oh, now I'm going to have an eating disorder. I
Right.
was
Of
just
course.
kind of
Right.
like, it became something I was good at. I was just on a diet. I was just, excelling at the one thing that I was really good at, is how it felt like.
Yeah.
And I would hear about, because there's so much in diet culture. You go to a wedding and people are like, oh, I feel so guilty. I ate this
Mm-hmm.
cake.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, I'm being really good, meaning like they were restricting what they wanted to eat.
Right. Right.
And I felt like, wow, my life is a flaming dumpster fire in every other way, but here's something that I'm really good at that everybody else would kill for. And
Mm-hmm.
people would comment me on weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they were concerned, I would take it as a pat on the back, like, wow. And I would just like strengthen myself in doing this. I didn't understand that it was a sickness until later on. And then, yeah, like once you get into the depths of it and your brain is starved for nutrition, things warp and you don't really see things the same way anymore. Um, but in the beginning, also, I mean, my mom says that by the time I was 3 years old, she knew something was up, but she also thought like, okay, well, maybe it's a phase and you'll grow
Mm-hmm.
out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like they didn't have anything to compare it to.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't fault them for it. And then I think, they thought teenagers are moody and brooding and yeah, sometimes, but I don't think that they knew where the boundary was from brooding to there's a real serious problem here. Um, and eventually, I mean, they figured it out. By that point, I was really deep into it, but I think they still kind of had this idea that it was a manipulative thing. And in a way it is, but it wasn't something that I could stop. And it became just this beast that lived in our house with us. I mean, the eating disorder just it's a horrible, anybody who understands eating disorders knows it's not just a diet gone wrong. It is a full-fledged life ruiner for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't until I relapsed in seminary, I think, that they started to understand that this is a real thing because by that point, I had turned into a good kid and pulled my life around and I was doing really well. And the thing is, I had, they took me to therapy in high school and I made kind of sort of progress, but it wasn't eating disorder specific. And it wasn't like it kind of got it to look in check. I gained a little bit of weight and, I pulled my grades up and I was doing okay, but it kind of was this, I don't know, like I felt like I was in like rebound catch up mode. And in seminary, I was so determined to prove myself. And I only got into one seminary because everybody else was kind of looking at me as a liability, I think, which I don't blame them. But I wanted to make the school that took me in proud. I wanted to be their star student and make that the best decision they ever made for giving me a chance. And it all fell through my fingers because I also, I told you I had undiagnosed mental illness from really young, and I have bipolar disorder, and that's something that hits the fan for most people,
Mhm.
late teens, early 20s. And my first real manic episode was in seminary, and I starved myself out of it and relapsed into anorexia. And I was so in denial that I had no clue what was happening. Like, I legit had no clue. I went to doctors. I'm like, I'm not getting my period anymore. My hair is falling out. Like, what's going on? If I lift my arms, I'm going to faint. I can't stand on the buses anymore. Like, there were things that were so obvious. I remember calling my parents before Shabbos one week and telling them, because I think they started to understand, like, when I would tell them I got a blister on my foot in September and now it's March and it's not healing, like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I would have like bruises and cuts that just wouldn't heal. My body didn't have the energy for it.
Right.
And I didn't understand what had happened. And I told them that one week, this is crazy. I weigh less now than I did when I had anorexia. And I was seriously like, it boggled my mind. Like, how is this happening? What's wrong with me? Um, and the doctors were basically like, one of them says, like, so Israeli style. No offense to Israeli doctors, but he was like, you don't like the food in this country? Come on. Like, go
Right.
help me something, you'll be fine.
Right.
And
Were you just not eating?
I was not eating, and I was exercising like crazy. And by that point, I was hiding it. At some point, I realized, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I think I have an eating disorder. And once I allowed myself to think that, it became, oh no, like, that is the biggest crime in seminary, is to have an eating disorder. You're going to get expelled. Like, that's how I was thinking. Whether it would have been true or not, I don't know. I was in Shana when things really got bad. And my roommate walked in on me talking about it on the phone once, and I swore her to secrecy. Like, I was that friend who was trying to get people to keep secrets about like deadly stuff. And I feel bad putting her in that position. I'm sorry if you're out there. No, because I lost touch with her. I feel really bad.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that happens in seminary, just so you know. Like, we all
I
have
know,
no
but it's not great.
privacy.
It's not a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
And
So
I've been on the other side of horrible secrets before. And, like, I feel bad doing that to her.
wait, so the whole Shana Aleph, you were struggling like
Yeah.
severely, and then you went home, and then you went
No,
back?
no, no. Shauna Aleph, I was struggling, but it didn't reach the level of you need to be in a hospital.
Mhm.
I was very thin. I was doing very eating disorder things. Like, for example, there were things that were horribly eating disorder that I was doing, but I had no clue that it was wrong. Like, chewing food and spitting it out so
Mhm.
that you
Mhm.
get to taste it and not get the calories. I thought, like, oh, I found the loophole.
Right.
you know,
Right.
Not throwing up, because I thought bulimia was cheating because I was really sick. I was like,
Mhm.
anorexia is the gold standard.
Mhm.
Bulimia is cheating.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's sick. And I don't stand by that anymore. It's all one big
It's all the
mess.
eating disorder lying to you, basically. Let's just
Of course. I just don't want anybody listening to that thinking that one's
that
better than the other. They're both horrible.
right.
Um,
Yeah, right. That's why I'm saying that. Like, let's just be really clear that this is disordered
yes, that's
eating.
why I'm clarifying that there's nothing glamorous or good about any of it. And it's the same, by the way. Compulsive overeating, it's not even like people say, oh, it's the flip side. No, it's the exact same thing. It's using food for something. So it's all the same as bad. It's all the same as you got to get help. And I think a big part of why people don't get help, I've heard this over and over and over from people that I was in treatment with, is I'm not sick enough.
Right.
And I think insurance
Hey,
companies say, like, huh?
I have this book right here, Sick Enough. It's a really great book.
Oh yeah, look at that. Because
Yeah,
it's a thing. It
and
really is
it's
a thing.
about, yeah, it's Jennifer Guadini, and she's a doctor, an eating disorder doctor, and that's exactly what she talks about. You are always sick enough if you have any level
Oh
of
yeah, you always deserve help. It could be the tiniest, you're dipping your toes in the water, but the thing is, they say the best anorexic is a dead one. And I
mm,
think that, the most powerful experience that I had with that was one time when I was at the treatment center. There was this woman who came in, and she like stumbled through the door, and she was a walking skeleton. I kid you not. They sent her to the hospital right away. She wasn't even expected to make it. And she did eventually come back, and she was admitted when she was a little more, medically okay. But I remember one of the other patients, and we were all sitting there. It was like a group of us, like really deep eating disordered people. And one of them said, "I don't understand. Doesn't anybody love her? She's married. She has parents. Doesn't anybody love her? How did they let it get that bad?" Which, okay, you can't blame family for it. That's completely not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that any of us would have gotten that bad. Any of us could have died from this. It's not a matter of, you can't be a little bit pregnant, it
Mm-hmm.
all leads to baby,
Mm-hmm.
assuming all goes well.
Right.
But,
Right. Right. I've heard that many times, like
yeah,
mental illness doesn't discriminate. Eating disorders don't discriminate. Like,
right. But it's just like, you can't have a little bit of an eating disorder. And something else that they would talk about a lot was, you can't give it up halfway. The whole
mm-hmm.
thing has to go, or it's just gonna, grow back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's so important. So do you go home in between Shauna Aleph and Shauna Bet?
I did, and I went to college, and I got a B+ in economics, and that was the end of the world to me, because I had to have that 4.0 GPA in college. And that was a big problem for me, because it was a transfer credit if I was to stay at Turo, which was my plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to go back to, I was at Neve, which I loved, and I owe so much of who I am today to them. They're an incredible group of people, and just, I can't say enough wonderful things. I
Yeah,
was
I
a train
also went
wreck,
to
and they
Neve.
put up with so much for me.
Yeah, I went to Neve after my Shauna Bet. I didn't go to Shauna Bet, so I went that summer for six
Yeah.
weeks, and it was like they called it Neve Buffet.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, it was really cute because like I was from birth. I grew up religious, and I was like, could I please go to the classes for people who aren't religious, please? And it was like so fun. Like it was such a
That's
great way to like
amazing.
learn from the beginning. So yeah, Neve is amazing.
My first year was at Nicola Esther, which was like the top floor of Neve.
Hmm.
Not top like better, top like literal
Yeah,
top
yeah,
floor.
yeah,
And it was you're familiar?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it is no more, which is very sad.
It's very
Um,
sad. Yeah, I heard.
and then Shonabet, I went down to like the main floor,
Hmm.
where I was completely not ready for life, and it showed.
Right, right.
But
And
I
yeah.
was making myself crazy. I was
Mhm.
really in prove myself mode. Like, I wanted to prove to everybody that I was a worthwhile human. And one of the things that I learned that I got completely obsessive about, to a dangerous degree, was that, you know, at bar bat mitzvah age, you are responsible, in this world, in the
Mhm.
Besdin here, but
Mhm.
you're responsible Besdin Shalmala at 20. So I'm like, oh no, I'm 19 and a half and I am not ready. And
Mhm.
I was on this quest for complete perfection by the time I turned 20. And I felt like, if I wasn't achieving that, it, you know, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough. Anything that I didn't succeed at was because I wasn't trying hard enough. I felt like, if I make every right choice minute by minute by minute, then, it's only logical that I will, you do the right thing every single choice you have. And so I completely didn't get it, that I'm a different person than my charismatic best friend. I am a different person than somebody who has good math abilities. I just thought that, you know, I could overhaul my entire self. It was very unrealistic. And part of what happened there was the relapse.
Mhm.
I was also manic out of my mind. I I wrote about this in the book, that after Yom Kippur, I got it in my head because one of the classes said the best time to build a sukkah is immediately after Yom Kippur. So I bounced over to my friends the second that Yom Kippur was over and said, let's build sukkahs. And they're like, let's eat spaghetti. What's wrong with you? And I called every family in Harnof that I knew. And I'm like, please, can I come build your sukkah? I have to build a sukkah. Can you please let me build your sukkah? And they're all like, no. Like, No. And so I rounded up whoever would listen to me and said, let's go to my dorm room. We're going to learn about sukkahs because that's the next best thing, is learning about it if you can't do it. And I had a few grudging friends who came over and they're like, okay, what's wrong with you? But like, and I knew I was out of control. I knew it. Like, I could hear myself sounding just, a mile a minute,
Mm-hmm.
and, the pressured speech, and
Mm-hmm.
like all my ideas, people weren't making the leap with me from idea to idea because I was
Right.
just shoving my words like through a funnel and they were getting all messed up. And I felt so out of control. And every single time that I would want to start, I'm like, okay, start over. And I would do that like 10, 20 million times a day. And I was losing confidence in myself. And somehow my mantra became, stay in control. You've got this, by not eating. And
Mm-hmm.
then I started to feel like I don't deserve to eat unless I'm really hungry. And then it became, I never deserve to eat, or only specific things. Like, I have to have self-control. And there was this story that they said about like some great tzaddik, about he wanted to have a glass of water. I don't remember all the details. Something like having a glass of water was on the other side of the table, or he was. So the question was, is he going to get up to go get the glass of water and then like make the bracha or something? I don't remember exactly the deal, but it had to do with, is he going to do this, which is the effort just to get what he wants, which was the cup of water, or is he going to stay seated, or whatever it was? I don't know. And I knew the answer before anybody said. He's going to get up, go there, prove that he's going to do the effort, not get the cup of water and go back. And that was the answer. And it had nothing to do with my reasoning, which was just, I was making life really hard for myself. But I don't know, I was just in this place where I didn't like myself, and I wasn't at peace with who I was. I felt totally, totally like I just couldn't control myself, and nobody was, like, if anybody knew who I really was, which is, I think so many people feel that way, is if
Yeah.
anybody knew the mess inside.
Mm-hmm. So,
Really
so
sad.
then,
I was very, very alone. I felt like this was my biggest secret. I couldn't tell anybody anything. Like, I just couldn't let anybody in, and it became hide it at all costs, not just because I'll get in trouble for having an eating disorder, but also just it became the only thing that made me feel okay. And if I told people, then I was going to have to get help. And if I
mm-hmm.
don't, and I wanted help, but I didn't want to gain an ounce.
Right.
And I didn't want to give up on being perfect or trying to be perfect.
And all throughout this time, were your friends concerned? Did they compliment your weight loss? Like, what was going on
There was
with the
this
people
one
around you?
dorm counselor who kept telling me it's a blessing to be thin every time she saw me. And then I got the flu at one point, which
It hurts
I
me.
don't know what it actually was. No. It really was. I was running a ridiculously high fever and I was really sick. But the thing is, I wouldn't have been that sick had my immunity been anything normal.
Mm-hmm.
But I went away to my cousin's house and I came back about a week later and I had dropped dramatically from already dangerously overweight. And
Underweight.
yeah, yeah. Um, and did I say overweight?
Yeah.
Oh, I meant underweight. Sorry. I guess that's how I looked at it at the time, but no. Um, and that was when she stopped telling me it's a blessing to be thin, and she just kept her mouth shut. And people were starting to stare like, you don't look good. And
Okay. So then how'd you eventually, like, how'd you get help?
so eventually, I don't remember. The truth is, there's so much that I don't remember about that year. I kept thinking, I'm just waiting for the right time to recover. I thought I was in control. I thought like this is a lifestyle choice. And I had it all planned out that one day when I have my own apartment, I'm going to keep it at 90 degrees and I won't be cold anymore. And I'm going to get very fluffy couches so that my bones won't hurt when I sit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that and there's whole like really sick communities out there online that promote horrible, horrible things, which thank God I didn't fall into that stuff because I didn't have internet in seminary, which was good. But I didn't believe that eating disorders were a real thing either. I thought I was in control. I was in the driver's seat. I didn't realize how out of control that I really was until there were two things. There was one, there was a number that I wanted to reach on the scale. And I don't say numbers for triggering reasons to people who might be going through it. But
Mhm.
I remember the day that I finally saw that number on the scale. And I thought that when I reached that, like that was going to be like, I did it, I made it.
Mhm.
And as soon as I saw that number, I was like, that's it. Now what? Obviously this isn't low enough. If things aren't good now, then obviously this isn't low enough. And then immediately a new number popped into my head.
Mhm.
And it's so arbitrary and it's never going to be enough. And I realized then, but then the physical was, I decided that on Purim I was going to recover. I decided I was going to this big Suda in Beit Shemesh and I was going to be better on. And I went there and I couldn't bring myself to eat anything. And then I went back to Neve, absolutely miserable. I was on a bus of drunken yeshiva guys and they were all like so happy. And I remember feeling like, you know, the sun is shining and everybody's happy. And I can't feel any warmth, any light, any happiness. I'm just crushed under this horrible burden. And then I went back and I'm like, okay, I have to eat something. And I had a little bit of soup and I got violently ill all alone behind one of the buildings at Neve. And I couldn't tell anybody. And I realized my body can't even handle food anymore. And I just felt like I'm going to die. I am actually going to die. And there's nothing that I can do about this. And I started, I mean, I had been doing it for a while, like drawing calendars and just like fantasizing about time going faster, but it just wasn't going fast enough. And I eventually, I met with one of the rabbis at Neve privately and gave him zero details and said, do you think that if somebody quits something that they started, that they're a failure? And I don't know what he figured out from that, but he said, no, absolutely not. You can quit whatever you want. And I made up my mind, I'm going to go home and get help. And I went home, and as Hashgacha Pratis would have it, I was hospitalized on my 20th birthday. So that's where my quest for perfection was taking me. I was in early heart failure. They told me had I waited even a few more days, I might not have made it. They were shocked I survived traveling with luggage. They were shocked that I survived the plane ride. I got very, very sick on the plane, but I just felt like, you know, I'm nervous or whatever it is. But no, I was actually in the hospital on all kinds of medications to help my body be able to digest again. I wasn't allowed to get out of bed, even to go to the bathroom, because if I like sat up, it could, you know, I wasn't allowed to have more yogurt or fluid per day because it could kill me. You know, they had to get my heart healthy. I mean, that's where it was leading. And I think that as much of a wake up call as that was, you know, rock bottom in itself doesn't get you better. It can give you motivation, but also it doesn't, I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit. It
No, you're
doesn't,
not. You're not rambling, because I think that everything you're saying is important for people to.
it doesn't last. Like you really, when there's inspiration, any kind, you have to jump on it because it will fade and you have to make that start. And I knew that I needed to be somewhere 24/7 where recovery was going to be my life for a while. But I had it in my head that if I could ask for help, then I didn't need help. Because if you're well enough to ask for help, then obviously you're well enough to do it yourself,
Right.
which is insane. That's not
Mm-hmm.
how it works. And I felt like I needed to get other people to make the decision for me so that it was, you know, legit. Eating disorders are very sneaky. And I was in deep, 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 deep trouble. And
Mm-hmm.
I got myself kicked out of day treatment. And then I had to go to residential. And I'm simplifying the story like crazy, but I worked really hard in residential. I'm very proud of that. It was miserable. I was scared to leave at the end because I didn't want to relapse. And, you know, it was hard. It was really, I think it was harder going home than going there because then you have to put it into practice in your daily life. And I still wasn't happy with my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
The first few years were harder, but after, I mean, I look back on this and I, you know, I relate to the struggle. I understand it. but it is not a thing anymore. I'm completely normal with food. I don't have to do any food charts or anything. I'm totally, intuitive about what I eat. And my weight is more than I want it to be after having kids. A bunch of medical stuff that happened along the way unrelated to that. But I can be sad about what I look like sometimes. I think we all are. I'm still at a place of acceptance. I can not like that I gained a couple pounds and it doesn't affect how I eat that day.
Okay, I really want to talk about transitioning from that to intuitive eating, but I just want to say a few points. Okay.
Yeah.
When you were talking about reaching a certain number on the scale and then
Mhm.
realizing that when you got to that number, you still weren't happy,
Right.
that happens to everyone, whether or not they have an eating disorder. And it's so important for people to hear this because I just hear it so often in my office and with so many people, like, I just want to be X number. Like, if I get to that number, then I'll be happy. And then, like, there's this whole fantasy around this number that, like, number one, you will not be happy if you get that number. And even if you are happy, it's so fleeting. And you have to, let's say you're on a diet and you're maintaining it because you're working really, really hard. Like, your whole life becomes maintaining a number for what? So, like, even though, like, you were saying, like, you were rambling, you really weren't, because that's like a really important thing for people to hear. And especially from somebody who went through this experience, like, and I know for my own disordered eating days, like, yeah, the low number that I got to was never low enough. And, like, we're just so programmed to shrink and be smaller and just work harder to at a number that doesn't even matter. So thanks for sharing that. And also, I think that people who have, like, a personality type, who are more like, hmm, like rule followers, like, they struggle in seminary because I definitely struggle with this still today. Like, you hear something, like, and it's like, let's say it's a halacha or it's like a fact. When you turn 20, your status changes. So then it becomes a lot of black and white, which we know, like, isn't real Judaism. So, like, I think that experience is normal. We're in seminary, we're learning new things, we want to be good, we want to be the best, we want to keep the Torah, and it becomes, like, very um I don't know, rigid, strict, black and white.
And by the way, even in recovery, that was a problem for me, that I couldn't admit that certain things in my religious observance fed into the eating disorder, because that would make a chillul Hashem, of course.
Mhm.
My hospital dietitian was asking me how keeping kosher played a role in eating disorder. And I was like, it doesn't. God gave me enough rules about food, and that, if anything, it should have saved me from the eating disorder. And I'll tell you, 13 years in recovery, I still do not buy vegetables that need to be checked unless they were checked by somebody else, because I know that that is a dangerous road for me to go on.
Mhm.
And my husband helps with certain things. I think I am prone to a little bit of, like, the religious OCD, and I don't say
Mhm.
that lightly. I think that it can get real out of hand. And um, I'm not diagnosed with that, but I get very, very hung up on rules, especially when there's, morality and religion involved. And I think it's something very, very common. I think a lot of people struggle with that. And you're right. It's
I
hard.
definitely struggle with that. Like, I know, um I read, like, the Rebbetzin Kanievsky book and the Rebbetzin Malchus book, and I have to be really careful because I just get my, like, that comparison and that, like, perfection that they sort of, like, portrayed in those books. Like, to some degree, they could really hurt us, to be honest. I'm just being honest.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I used to read the stories of tzaddikim when I was a kid, and if I wasn't like them, and my being adam l'chavero and judging people favorably, and you know, I was obviously a terrible person.
Right.
And you forget the part about how a lot of these stories I mean, all of them, they are only telling the shining moments of these people after they became great. They don't show the process of how they became. They didn't come out of the womb at that high level. They worked their whole lives. I mean, I'm
Right.
not putting them down. I'm sure that
Right.
they were wonderful children and teenagers, but hopefully they grew, as by the time they were an old sage, that's not attainable by anybody who's newer to the world. And
Mhm.
I didn't get that. And then also it kind of got, like this don't, what theft means, like do not steal. I could not use a pen that was left in a classroom because what if it belongs to somebody and they didn't hefker it? And I couldn't take a shortcut through any of these apartment buildings because I was wasting their air conditioning just by breathing it in or something. Like, even if it was like the door was open for somebody else, like I was so obsessed. And I think that, I have a Rav that I'm very close with now who has guided me on the idea that, like, they say that the body is not, was it, the body is not a checkbook. Calories in and calories out is not how it works. And I think, he said that 1 + 1 = 2, but that's not how it is with God. He doesn't judge us by, fact. There's so many nuances and so many, what is your challenge with it? And what is, like, there's so many layers upon layers of detail that only God knows. And people make mistakes. We were created imperfect and we work on ourselves, and God is kind and loving. And that was something that I did not understand, and people would say to me all the time, like, if you don't believe in tshuva, if you don't believe that Hashem forgives when you do tshuva, then, that's something wrong. And I would always counter back, which was the truth, that I'm not doubting that God accepts tshuva. I'm doubting if I did tshuva. And, I was just every step of the way in my way.
Mhm. Mhm. I could relate to what you're saying, actually, and I think
It's
that
still a struggle. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not like
yes.
totally past that at all, but
Yeah.
I'm better than I was when I was 20.
Right. Right. And that's the point, right? That we grow and like we are challenged and we change and yeah, we don't come out of the womb. No one does perfect because then what's the point? Right. Okay, so you were in residential treatment for 11 weeks, you said?
Yeah,
So how did you like pick that facility and how did that come to be?
they were the first one with a bed.
Got it. And you didn't like it?
I loved it. I mean, the first couple days I hated it and wanted to run away, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that, you know, that's going to happen when you have somebody with anorexia and here's a plate of food, you got to eat it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It becomes, yes, I wanted to be here. I remember the worst moment of the whole thing was, I think it was the second night I was there, and I had it in my head, this was the next thing. Once I get to residential, now I can recover. And then when they gave me food and I still couldn't eat it, I like just laid down on one of the couches there and snotted it up with all my tears and snot, because I was just like, I'm going to die here. If I can't do it here, I can't do it anywhere. I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't do it with therapy. I couldn't do it in day treatment. I couldn't do it. I was in day treatment for 5 weeks. Like, I gave it a go before I got myself kicked out. And and again, like, I'm simplifying that whole story too, because it wasn't just like, oh, I don't want to be here, so I'm going to break the rules. Like, I was struggling so hard, and they were kind of like, you have to gain weight or you're out. You have to, not self-harm or you're out. And like, these were things that I couldn't do in that setting. And
Right.
so I just didn't even try at the end and I got kicked out. And then it was like, you have to go to treatment. So we called a few places all over the country. And the first one with a bed was Renfrew in Florida. And
Mm-hmm.
they saved my life. They were wonderful, wonderful, but that doesn't make it easy.
For sure not. So what could you tell us a little bit about like the coping skills that you were referencing before, like in the 11
Oh, yeah.
chapters?
Um, Gosh. So I think a big part of it is knowing when to use what. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, dealing with your emotions about things is not for in the middle of a meal. I used to think that if I ate when I was emotional, I was therefore an emotional eater. And so I would have to be totally calm before I would eat. And eventually I realized that no, the way to get through a meal is to distract the heck out of yourself and get it done. And actually they knew that I wanted to do therapy. Like I was there to get better and I had all these things I wanted to talk about. And they held that over me. They're like, we're not doing any therapy until you are eating your meals. And they got me good because
Right.
I had to eat.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
did it
So you're saying one of the coping strategies is to distract yourself during a meal and not let
during
your
the meal
feelings.
because, that's when you're like in the battle. You don't stop to, think, oh, I got to put a Band-Aid on my foot in the middle of the meal. You can do
Mhm.
that after.
Right.
And they have the after meal support process groups and, the taking care of yourself. I also learned self-care is a whole lot more than bubble baths. There's, you got to let yourself cry. You got to eat normally. You have to sleep normally, things you don't necessarily want to do, but it's good for you. And
Mhm.
um, also having a list of things to do when you're kind of feeling like you're in crisis, who to call, if you need to call, like, and who to call for what. Um, not every friend is the right person to call for everything. So you might have a friend who's good to hang out and like helps you laugh and you're sad, and there might be somebody else who's good to vent to, and some,
Yes, I do
it's
know.
common sense, but sometimes when you're like kind of doing life 101,
Yeah.
you need to go back to basics.
Yes, and I think that these are coping skills to use even if you don't have an eating disorder.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure. I mean, so
yes.
many of these things are just, when I did 12 steps for a while, I went to EDA, Eating Disorders Anonymous. It wasn't a huge part of my recovery, but it was cool for help, for, connecting with other people. And there's so much in the 12 steps that, like, addiction or not, eating disorder or not, these are rules to live by. Just the authenticity
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
facing yourself for who you are and accepting the reality of who you are and what you do and not glossing over. It doesn't mean you have to tell everybody everything, but
Right.
at least to be honest with yourself about where you're at in different parts of your life. See yourself honestly and without shame. Like it's,
Right.
you're not like when you look at somebody else, I think everybody knows that when you're looking at somebody's Facebook profile, you're not seeing everything in their life.
Right.
When you're looking at them, on the street or at shul or even just hanging out with them, you're also not seeing everything. You can't see what they're really feeling or thinking. You don't see what the struggle was when they were running carpool all chipper and happy.
Right. 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 Did you ever read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle? We were talking about this a little bit.
No, it sounds familiar though.
So I don't even remember if she talks about this specifically in the book because she has a bunch of books, but she struggled with bulimia when she at the age of 11. And then she struggled with like drug addiction, and I think that she found out she was pregnant when she was like an alcoholic or something like that. And she started going to these meetings. She wanted to recover. And she was like, oh, this is when I found like these are my people, like, and I related to that. And I had been to some of the 12-step meetings also. Like I really went, somebody recommended it to me, not for eating, but it was very interesting. I only went a few times. It was like super, super, super interesting. And I thought back to that. I thought back to that when I heard Glennon talking about this, because I was like, I feel like a lot of this has to do with like personality types that we didn't get to choose. And like, let's say we're a highly sensitive person or an empath, or we just feel pain at a different level than other people. And sometimes that affects our mental health. Mostly, it usually does. And like for other people who don't get it, it's really hard to like find support and find almost like normalcy because other people don't get it. So you just feel so, besides for the pain that you feel so odd, you know? You know what I'm saying?
I do. Can I talk about Chazkino?
Yes. So tell us about Chaskino.
So, um, just how you're talking about a lot of people going to 12-step meetings and saying that these are my people. There were so many times, particularly with the bipolar, where I was jealous of the people with addiction because they had a place to go and a group. And I'm sorry, but self-help groups and stuff with bipolar, I have never seen that work well. Like there's certain things, and for sure with eating disorders, my God, you can't have a self-help, you need to have that guided.
Hmm.
But I'm not saying like EDA that's very regimented and it's very specific, but it's I'm talking about like more than that. And again, the truth is the 12 steps are all very regimented if they're done
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, I just felt like I couldn't find my group. And especially as a Jewish woman, there just wasn't anything. I was searching all over the place, like for a message board, for a phone meeting, for anything, and there just wasn't. And I went on one message group at one point. It was from help.com, I think, from support.com. And I met up with Zahava List there and we talked on the phone. And I was saying, like, I wish there was something, and I, at that point, I was starting to think about starting something. And she said, oh, I've had this whole plan for years. I want to do this group and I have a name for it and everything, Chaskenu. And she's like, well, you do it with me. Will we really start? And I said, yeah. And she's like, really? Like, you're not going to back out? And I'm like, no. So we started it as just a weekly phone group. And I knew there was a need for it, but I didn't realize how much of a need there was. And within the first 2 to 3 years, I think we had over 1,000 members. And
Wow. It's
there
all
were
people who struggle with bipolar.
not just bipolar, but all mental health issues. And it's not just for the people themselves, but also family members. So it's all Jewish women.
Hmm.
Not all of them themselves, like they might be married to somebody with a mental health disorder. But and it's amazing. It's peer support. So we have phone meetings twice a week, which started because the Monday night meetings, we had people joining from England and
Wow.
Israel,
Wow.
and it was the middle of the night for them.
Hmm.
And so there was a need for another group. So we started Wednesday afternoons, mostly for international, but that's a pretty big group now, I think, too.
Wow.
And there's online support, and there's like a support list that people can, you get a copy of the list if you agree to be on the list, which I think is fair.
Yeah.
Like a Tehillim group, people can daven for each other. And there's an annual Shabbaton, a lot of things, a lot of ways for people to meet up. And it's something that grew beyond my wildest imaginings really fast, because people are like, they want to be understood and supported. And something that just blows me away about Chazkenu and the members of Chazkenu is they are like, there's no pretense. You don't have to hide anything. Everybody knows why you're there. Everybody
Hmm.
knows that you have a connection with this subject. There's no judgment. There's no stigma. And that's a big part of what we aim for at Chazkenu, is stop the stigma. The
Hmm.
stigma stops here, is
Hmm.
written on a lot of our stuff. And um, it's so wonderful to see women from all different walks of Judaism also just, at the Shabbaton, I was blown away. Like, there's people, who mainly speak Yiddish from very, very Hasidic backgrounds, talking to people from super modern backgrounds. And they're just, the common ground, you're a Jewish woman with a mental health struggle. And it's just real. Like, you can quit the small talk. You can quit hiding behind whatever mask you use when you're out in, the world. And I just think it would be so wonderful if it wasn't, nobody feels ashamed of a broken arm. But when you have something wrong mentally or emotionally, why should that be any different? And I think it was something that you had asked me in the email about how I decided to be open about my struggles. I think part of it came, people had asked me, like, you published with All I Am under your real name and not a pseudonym. And it was something that I thought about. Like, I really did, because this was a very personal book. But at the end of the day, I believe in standing behind what you write. And also, and this was something I had with the ebook. How do you say there's no shame in a problem if you will not put your name on it?
Yeah.
And I really believe that there is no shame in having a problem. And there's people, for example, even in the mental health world, there are certain mental health issues that are stigmatized more than others.
Yeah.
Borderline personality, for example. There are a lot of people who, like, there's so many assumptions made about it that nobody wants to admit that they're struggling with that. And I've heard people say in Chaskinu, it's the first time they're able to be open that that's a struggle. I mean, these are all people. They're not just showing up to, to just, they're all there because they're working on themselves, because they want to support other people and support their own healing. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
More rambles.
Totally.
Thank you.
No, you're not rambling. Like I know like people have told me like I blog about like my mom's death, and I blog about going to therapy and anxiety and stuff like that. And people are like, I can't believe you're so open. Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, first of all, like I say this all the time, but like I counsel people and I'm counseled. So like I just see the other side. Like I always say this, if somebody like looks like they're doing it better than you, like they either like have more help, Hashem gave them a personality that's more relaxed, or they're just faking it. Because like we all just struggle at the end of the day, and we all have struggles. And you're right, like if somebody was struggling with cancer, they wouldn't feel shame. They didn't choose it. No one chooses these things. These are the things that Hashem gave us. And
Nobody chooses mental illness either.
right, exactly.
Nobody chooses to survive trauma. Nobody, I mean, you know what I mean? Like to have gone through certain things that give you struggles. Like nobody picks what the hand that they're dealt.
Right. I actually was just when I was in Rochester, I was actually I listened to the book on audiobook on grief and grieving by David Kessler and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And something that really, first of all, I'll just say this, that in the week and a half that I was away, I tried to not be on social media and try not to work. And I was really trying to like, process my own grief and process the fact that I was in Rochester without a mother, and just be like, honest with myself and honest with what I was going through. And it was like, it happened to be like pretty apropos that that book became available, because I was waiting for it for a long time from the library. And I took like the week to like listen to it. And I remember David Kessler, he was talking, reading the book, and he was saying that a lot of times we say like, if anyone could fight it, if anyone could beat it, it's her or it's him, like when they were talking about any type of illness. And I remember like I wrote that in my blog when I wrote about my mom's death. I wrote like, I still think about this now. Like she was so strong. She had such a strong personality. And oh wait, something just popped up on my computer. Sorry. And I hope it's still recording. And I remember thinking like, if anyone could beat it, it's her. And when she died, I was like I was a little bit angry at her. Like, and I heard that in the book, that we feel anger towards the person who died. I was like, why couldn't she beat it? Like, why couldn't, and now, like now, sorry if I'm like making you uncomfortable, but
No, not at all. I'm so sorry for your loss. I loved her so much.
yeah, me too.
She's grieved every day by this entire community.
Yes, I know. And like, I hate, like when I heard that, I was like very much like validated. Like people don't like give up on their battle with eating disorders or cancer. Like, like it's not their fault. It's nobody's fault. And like, we do our best and we try our best, and Hashem runs the world. And with every like illness and pain, like I don't know, I just want people to hear this. Like, let's just be real. Like no one wakes up and picks, I wish I had bipolar. Nobody picks that.
Nope.
Anyways, this was really awesome.
On that chipper note.
On that chipper note. And is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? I'm going to put everything, like all your information and your books and the links in the show notes so people can find
Oh,
you.
sure. Thank you. There's there's one thing about mental illness that I did want to mention also, which is that every diagnosis means something different to every person who's going through it. And bipolar, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive borderline, all of these things the labels are only helpful as far as conceptualizing what you're dealing with, finding like the path towards healing from it, and being able to connect with other people who are similarly struggling, but it doesn't define who the person is. And also, I mean, I remember in Shidduchim, I was very careful about using the word bipolar because people have all kinds of ideas. I know I did. When I first heard bipolar out of the mouth of my therapist, I was like, no, because that's for people who are like in mental hospitals their whole lives. And I didn't understand that. First of all, I think it's like 1 in 100 people have some form of bipolar. It is very common. I happen to have a more severe form of it, but you can still live a totally normal life. I'm a mom, I'm a functioning mom, I am just, I'm working, I'm a productive member of society, I
You're an
am
author.
author, I am normal, whatever that means.
Mhm.
I think that, if you met me and I didn't tell you, I don't think that you'd have any idea. And there's so many people out there who are fighting whatever battle, or it's not something that affects me unless I'm in an episode. I just have to be careful about certain things that can trigger it. Certain, too much caffeine, for example, is a big trigger. Any kind of like those breathing steroids, I can't do those because they don't work. Like, so I've had to be careful. Like if I've had, anyway, there's a lot that people don't necessarily get when they hear a diagnosis in regards to a person. It doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. And the same thing when you hear it about yourself. It's not a value label.
Right.
Just want to say that.
No, I think that's really important in general. Like
And I think there's some pluses in it too. Like I know with bipolar, I think that, and also things that I've been through, like I wouldn't choose these things, but there are hidden brachas in them. I think that a lot of people have been through pain. They have more empathy. They have the capacity for greater empathy. And with bipolar, I think, it comes along with the capacity for deeper feeling also. And that's not a reason to avoid treatment. You have to treat it. But I think that looking for the silver linings and whatever it is, it's here. You might as well find the goodness in it, because I think that there is goodness in it.
Wow, that feel like that's just going to help so many people. Like even the last thing that you just said, like,
I hope so. And it's not fluff. It really is not fluff.
mhm.
I think it's fluff. They could email me and I'll tell them it's not fluff.
I feel like because you're the one that like is going through it or has gone through it, like, and like you're saying it without shame and without wincing and without covering it up and speaking low, and exactly what you said. If you're going to say there's no shame about it, and then you're going to put your name on it,
Yep.
and you didn't choose it, and look how you're using it as a positive thing in your life to help other people. It's like really incredible.
Thank you.
Sure. So thanks for joining us. And I will, yes, it was amazing. I will put all your information in the show notes so people could find you.
Wonderful.
Okay. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.